connected to, but never knew until I got there. Stay with us. A more mysterious part of my family history is my grandfather, who unfortunately seemed to be very secretive of his Holocaust experience. The story we were told was something about how he fled to Russia to work in Siberia as a way of protecting himself from the Nazis. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to actually get any video with him before he passed away. We were traveling through Treblinka, the death camp where over 800,000 people were murdered. I remember walking up to the camp and seeing an open field filled with massive stones. The stones were arranged in no particular order. They seemed very random and scattered, different sizes, different shapes. At the center of this field filled with thousands of stones is a memorial for the spot where the bodies from the gas chambers would be put on a fire pit and burned and scattered. Being that I had very little connection to Treblinka, I figured I would go around and help my friends who knew that they had family members who had passed away here. A friend of mine and I walked through the massive amount of stones looking for a city called Radom. And as she stood in front of this monument that was about the same size as she was, I took a step back to have a moment alone with this monument. I thought to myself how silly it was that I wasn't looking around and keeping an eye out for any type of city names on these thousands of stones that I was walking past. And without even moving a step, I looked at my feet and this stone had the name Mizrich Poladsky on it, the same exact name of my grandfather's town. The chances of this, I'm sure some statistician could tell you, 1 in a million chance that I would end up walking right next to the stone from my grandfather's town. It was like something had pulled me towards there and made me think to start looking for names of monuments and find the exact monument that I didn't know I was looking for. So at this point, I had a dark realization that chances are that my entire grandfather's family probably ended up here at Treblinka and were murdered. At this point, I bent down and touched the stone with my hands. I lit a candle for memorializing the people from my family who probably ended up here at Treblinka. I ended up speaking with some of my trip mates to tell them of this incredible coincidence. And the survivor who was with us on the trip had mentioned that her husband too was from this town. She had told me that her husband was also in Siberia during the war. Apparently, he had been kidnapped by the Russians in order to go work in Siberia for their war effort. This obviously cleared up a little bit of an interesting family mystery. Just imagining the coincidence of me coming across this monument, but also happening to talk to the survivor whose husband could give us the key to possibly what happened to my grandfather, why he left in order to go to Siberia, and then finding out where his family likely ended up was quite the amazing and awe-inspiring feeling. Walking in the footsteps of my grandmother and even my grandfather's family was honestly something that I could probably never forget, and I ended up going back a couple of years later in order to lead a trip like this for younger people. A few amazing things that I experienced from this trip, of course, was being able to literally walk in my family's footsteps and have a better understanding of what they went through. It is so important for Jewish people to explore these issues because as the survivors are now becoming less and less able to speak and go on these trips, we as the next generation must pick up the torch and continue this struggle to make sure never means never when we say never forget. For this Holocaust Memorial Day, I think back to the time I spent in Europe, walking in my grandparents' footsteps and exploring what they had to